Welcome back, everybody. Right now, we're going to talk a little bit about one thing that's very interesting in Japanese poetic culture: the Japanese death poem tradition. Yes, it's as interesting as it sounds. Anybody who follows Japanese culture knows that they take death very seriously. We also know that the Japanese throughout history have been very big on ritual and ceremony, and the way that they viewed death was not really an end, but rather the closing of one chapter of existence right before going into the next. So it kind of only makes sense that when you take their affinity for ritual, that it wasn't going to be very long until they figured out that the final words in this chapter of existence were going to have extreme and important meaning. And so, the Japanese death poem tradition came into existence. The idea that they would recite one poem before they died as their final words, or at least as close to their final words as they could make it. We don't really know exactly when this tradition formed, but we know it goes back at least 1,000 years, particularly because we actually have record of poems from that long ago. One of the most reliable sources of Japanese death poems we have from that long ago is Japanese Zen monks, because temples were far better at keeping records of things than most of the common people. However, the culture indicates that it's very probable that a lot of people, even those who were illiterate and commoners, kept this tradition. The chapter we know the best, though, about the Japanese death poem tradition obviously is within the culture of the Zen monks, and there were some very interesting stories about particular instances where Zen monks enacted the Japanese death poem tradition. Some of these monks spent weeks or months, even years, preparing for their deaths by contemplating and retooling their final words over and over in their heads. And as we know about Japanese poetry, the in particular verses are usually quite small. So we're talking anywhere from 2 to maybe 7 lines on average. A few of them had even been preparing their final words for most of their entire lives. There was an extreme deliberate nature in the sense that several of these monks actually predicted not just the day, not even just the hour, but the very minute of their deaths. In fact, there are several stories of monks going to their congregation and announcing, "I'll be dying tomorrow at noon. Get everybody together and we'll have a ceremony." And that's pretty much exactly what they did. The disciples would gather together, they'd have a tea ceremony, a couple of other ceremonies. The monk would get up, recite his final poem, sit down or lay down, and within a few minutes, they'd be gone. Was this sheer willpower? A really good guess of their health? Or some kind of prophetic ability? We're probably never really going to know for sure. But what is purely factual and undisputable are the words themselves. Let's take a look at 3 examples of Japanese death poems. This one was written by Renkai Doryu, who died in 1278. We don't know the month. 30 years and more, I worked to nullify myself. Now I leap the leap of death. The ground churns up. The skies spin round. Pretty cool, huh? The next example we have is by Musho Joso, who died in May 15th, 1306. Sometimes we know the exact day, sometimes we don't. When it comes, just so. When it goes, just so. Both coming and going occur each day. The words I'm speaking now, just so. Obviously, we know that this is the translation to English of the original Japanese where these occurred in. And here's one more by Kozen Nikikyo, who died on February 12th, 1360. Empty-handed I entered the world. Barefoot I leave it. My coming, my going, 2 simple happenings that got entangled. One of the great things about the poetry is that it really sums up how they actually viewed death, and as you can see, it's different for every one of them. I kind of imagine what it would be like today if people in modern-day America, for example, decided that they were going to go out with a final poem. Anyway, see you on the next track.